Welcome, everyone. Season 4 of Runners Roundtable is conversations with runners, and this season is all about continuing the discussions with female runners within our community and female runners that are doing things to better the running community as a whole. And today I am joined by Vanessa Peralta-Mitchell. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast because it feels like, for me, a full circle moment. The RRCA, which is the Run Coaches of America, they have a Facebook group. And I think this had to have been sometime last year, but there was another coach, Becky Croft. Hi, Becky. She posted, join me on Facebook for a live discussing menopausal running and all the work that she's doing. So that's how I found out about you, because I joined that live and I watched the two of you in conversation. And then Becky has been on the podcast twice now. We did a whole episode on conversations with coaches where she talked about herself as a coach, her coaching style, how she approaches coaching. And then she also was on for season 3, where we talked about menopause and running and perimenopause and surgical menopause. And just, she's such a wealth of knowledge. And every time her and I would talk, she would say, you need to reach out to Vanessa. You need to reach out to Vanessa. You need to talk to Vanessa. So for me, again, full circle moment of I'm finally talking to you after Becky encouraging me multiple times to reach out to you, to put myself out there to you, to try to get you on the podcast and talk with you. So I'm really, really excited to have you here. And the first question I have for you is just give us an introduction to who you are and how you came to the sport of running.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. So glad that Becky was our common denominator. She's one of our original game changers. And yeah, really excited to be here. And I'm glad it's full circle for you as well as me, because, having our game changers out there in the world and showing their expertise and the value that they bring to the industry is certainly important to me. But yes, my name is Vanessa Peralta-Mitchell. I'm owner of VCPM Inc. and the creator of our Game Changers program, which brings in more funds and resources so that more women of color can become certified run coaches. The bigger mission there is really redefining who people see as those experts and leaders in the running industry. I'm also the creator of the Female Coach Lead, which sounds like the IG Live that you attended. So it's a LEAD, LEAD, that stands for Leveraging, Educating, Amplifying Diversity. And we have that IG Live once a month on the 16th. And it really hones in on one specific coach and their specialty. So that coach is a woman of color, certified, and it just shows those in the community and those in the running world who to look for expert advice. How I got to running? That is a tricky question. I will say that I didn't start running until after our first child was born. And now we're literally going to be taking him to college on Friday, which is crazy. He's 18 now. I guess allegedly that means he's an adult. But how I came to running really was before that. Before he was born, I was back at home. So I'm in the Philadelphia suburbs, but I'm a Jersey girl. I grew up in Jersey. And I remember being in the living room at home with my mom, and this documentary came on. And it talked about women in sports, and it covered a whole bunch of different types of sports, not just running. But, in viewing that documentary, it really inspired me. I felt like, wow, all these women worked so hard to give us the equal rights just to participate in sports. And, I wanted to pay homage to that. And the only sport that was realistic for me at the time, because I was mid-20s, was running. Because I couldn't just join the WNBA, right? Or, soccer, Major League Soccer, or anything like that. So running spoke to me because I felt like something I could do, even though I had never actually done any type of race or running other than sports in college, sports mostly in high school, I should say. So that day, I was so moved by this documentary that I was like, you know what? I'm going to run a marathon. And I had no idea, Stephanie, how I was going to do that. Literally no one from my family, no one from my community, none of my friends. My high school and college didn't even have a track team. Like I had no connection to the world of running, you know? But that day I vowed to myself that I was going to run the 26.2 miles. And it took me a couple of years, but I eventually did do it. So that's how I got introduced to running.
And why the marathon? Like of all the distances, was that the distance that was covered in the movie?
Well, yes, they shared the
Okay.
story of KB Switzer, but honestly, like this is how much I didn't know about running. The only thing I knew about road racing was the New York Marathon. So, I'm from North Jersey. New York is a hop, skip, jump, and away. Like, the Lincoln Tunnel, even George Washington Bridge, all 20 minutes away. So we spent a lot of time in the city, and all I knew about running was the New York City Marathon. And so when they covered KB Switzer and the Boston Marathon, I really had no connection there. To me, I'm thinking like what's close to me? And I thought 26.2. And this is how little that I knew about running, that even my first race that I did was a 10K. I didn't even know that there was a 5K like option. Like that's how green I was in this space, and so for me to vow to myself that I was going to run that distance was huge, because I really hadn't run. I think one time my friend in college was like, "Hey, let's go for a run," and I was like, "Why?" We're not like playing a sport or something. And remember us running like around the block, but just to get to the corner, you know what I mean? I was like out of breath. It just wasn't something that I had any connection to back then.
That's so funny. I'm always amazed by people whose first foray into running is such a big distance. How was that first marathon for you? And obviously, it didn't turn you off of running, but how was that first marathon experience for you?
Yeah, well, it's funny because, like I said, it took a couple of years, and in the meantime, my husband, my boyfriend, we were expecting our first child, our son, which wasn't, expected at the time, and so I moved from Jersey to be down in the, Philadelphia area, and so I had to really take a pause and understand that it is okay to redirect what my goal was going to be. So even though New York City Marathon was like the ultimate goal, I really had to be realistic and give myself grace and say, like, you know what, I still am going to do the marathon, but it's okay that it's going to be Philadelphia. Philadelphia is going to be my first marathon. And that experience was all the things, just like any journey. Each race has its own beautiful, beautiful journey leading up to that starting line. And so this is my first one. And I would say, oh my goodness, I knew so very little about running. Like I said, my first race was a 10K. I didn't know. I was wearing shoes from like who knows when, definitely from college. I mean, barring my husband's, oversized sweatshirt. I had my sweats on that weren't like nothing, everything was cotton, you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I had like literally no idea. But eventually I found out about like run clubs and stuff. So I joined a run club, and they were providing a training that led up to the Philadelphia Marathon. So I got really close with two women. So shout out to Cassandra and Vicky. And we really spent the next 12 weeks bonding and training together. And it was a really tough journey. I would say 18 miles. That I remember that particular training, that long run was so difficult for me. And I remember coming home and crying and being upset, and just like, the three of us usually run together. I told them to go kind of like go on without me type thing, because I had felt so defeated. I didn't understand the benefits of, or I didn't even know about training your mind as much as you train your body. So I had really, really was being hard on myself mentally. But I did complete the 18 miles, and it was a conversation with Cassandra and my separate conversation with my husband that really honed in for me. It's not only about where you're going, but it's about how far you've come. And I
Mm.
didn't realize, like, wow, like I couldn't run the block. You know what I mean? I was out of breath. And here I am, like, I just completed 18 miles. like, how amazing is that? Like, I need to take a pause and really understand, like, I've come so far. And my mind was more focused of like, oh, I have so much more to go. And like, wasn't really giving myself that moment of celebration. So leading up to marathon, it was all the things, did have our son, didn't know much about running. I even remember taking like a 4-wheel stroller to try to run with him. Don't do that. I'm sure everyone knows that nowadays. Didn't even know joggers existed, all the things. But I was learning and growing, you know what I mean? Growing not only my capability of endurance running, but also my knowledge and my connection to the love of the sport, the love of the change that comes from the challenge of training for a marathon. And I mean, there's so many other things, but I do want to share that on race day, everybody came out. Like, you got to understand, Stephanie, like literally no one in my circle ran. So like I had my parents there, I had my husband there, I had friends from college there, sorority sisters, friends, my goddaughter. Like, there was people's boyfriends came out, they made signs, everything. It was like so beautiful, a memorable moment. And back then, like the last couple of, maybe quarter mile or so, back then they let people kind of run out with you. So I remember Cassandra, Vicky, and I, first of all, we were trying to meet each other. It was like needles in a haystack, right? We couldn't find each other on race day. So we spent the last 12 weeks of like blood, sweat, and tears, basically. And then race day morning, I couldn't find my comfort zone. The only thing I had going for me, though, is I had told them exactly what I was wearing. I told them exactly how my hair was going to be. Like, I had my cornrows in, I had my, red top. And I remember being in this crowd of who knows how many thousands upon thousands of people. And Vicky's like, Vanessa. And I was like, oh, I turned around and hugged like I had never seen her before. Like I hadn't seen her in a long time, but we had just trained, but we found each other, and we were really confident that Cassandra was going to show up behind us. Sometimes she'd be late to the meetups, but she would always run up and be like, hey guys, hey ladies. I can't remember what mile it was, but sure enough, she was like, hey ladies. We're like, Cassandra. Like, we found each other. And I remember that moment too, because one of the professional photographers actually grabbed a snapshot of the three of us together, which is like, you know what I mean? Like, all the things were like aligning itself. And yeah, so towards the end, I mean, Vicky was a soldier. Like, I mean, she was coming to training runs with like her 2-year-old in an actual jogger. She knew what to do. But so like, I mean, she was set. I mean, so at one point she needed to keep going, and that was fine. Like, we were rooting for her, and Cassandra and I actually were able to finish the race together. But in that last quarter mile, I remember my husband coming out and running in his Timberland boots and his sweatshirt and everything, but just like, hey, he's like, you really running, because he thought I would, you see those videos of like people like barely getting over the finish line and stuff like that. But no, he didn't know, like, about half a mile before that, my hamstring gave out. And luckily, the run club had some goo, which I never liked the consistency of goo. But that day I was loving every single morsel piece that I can, get from that goo. But that person definitely helped me. And I was able to run this last piece. And he was like, babe, you really running? I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it. And it was so nice because he understood that this moment he's been a part of, but I really, not that I wanted or needed to, but he kind of let go of my hand so that I can finish it with Cassandra. And so right before the finish line, like, I have like my friends that were holding the signs on my right, I have my family on the left, and me and Cassandra just holding hands and like reaching for the sky, like, we did it. Like, it was just an amazing feeling. And like, I can't, like everyone, who's probably done it can't quite explain, but there's something about that transformation, that moment of realization that, wow, I just did what I thought was the impossible. And then your mind quickly goes to, well, what can I do next?
Yeah. I mean, I love everything you've shared, because I wish I had someone to run all my marathons with me, because it really does make it so much easier when you have a friend there with you, when you have someone who's is especially a training partner that has seen all your highs and lows and has
Ooh,
learned
yes.
so much about you and your life from those weeks of training, that is such a beautiful way to kind of cap off that training cycle. And I'm with you. The marathon changes you. And it for me, I'm always curious who I'll become on the other side of it. You know, when you're in the training, and I'm in marathon training myself right now, where it just feels hard. Like it's just hard.
Oh,
But
yeah.
that journey from start line to finish line, like just getting to a race healthy and able to finish it, and then focusing on finishing who you are across that finish line, you're just different. You're changed. And I know for myself, the more marathons I do now, at least, the more in awe of myself I am. So
Mm.
I'm curious, how did you go from running this marathon to then run coaching?
Yeah. So I felt that there was a responsibility level, being the first in my circles of community, friends, and family to run and to do a marathon. You're automatically seen in this, go-to person. You're seen as that person. And would have a lot of people ask me questions. They started to get interested, and they were much smarter. So, they're gonna do like a 5K, or they wanted to do like a 10K or a half. And so at that point, leading up to the marathon, I had run a couple of distances, and I was still running afterwards. And so I became this like go-to expert in the eyes of my family, friends, and community. And I felt that it was my responsibility to step up to that role. It wasn't as simple as that, though. I will say I did look into being certified through, RRCA, Roadrunners Club of America, and it was a couple $100. Back then, it was also in person. So there was none close to me. And so I kind of put it on the back burner because, a couple $100 plus flight, plus hotel, plus food, it just wasn't the type of investment I could do at that time. But, I do have a belief in a higher power, and God had other plans. So, fast forward to being pregnant now with our third child. I was about 7 months pregnant, and I got laid off from my job. So they laid off, I was a senior project manager, and they laid off about 16 of us in the US, and they were outsourcing our role overseas at a cheaper cost. So, you don't really think that your world's going to turn upside down. You feel like some sense of security, right? When you're 7 months pregnant at a job you had been for years. But I had also had this feeling before that, is this what I want to keep doing? There was two roles I was feeling. I was a senior project manager, and then I was helping with the social responsibility. I was leading the US efforts for UNICEF. But I remember day one at that job, and I remember feeling like, this is a stepping stone. Like, this is not my all. This is not where I'm going to end up. This is going to help me, to whatever it is that I'm supposed to be doing. And fast forward to the day that I had gotten laid off, although I didn't think about those things, because you internalize, that you feel like, I failed, or like I did something wrong. And then on top of that, the layers of pregnancy and emotions.
Yeah.
But it really took me a second. And I think that's important, right? For us to feel the feelings that we're in the moment, you have to acknowledge all the pieces of you. And sometimes those pieces are feelings, not good or bad. They're just maybe comfortable or uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And, I had to sit in that discomfort for a while. But what it did is it gave me space to think about, well, what do I want to do now? And that idea of being a run coach all of a sudden went from the back burner to the forefront. And I was thinking, oh, let me look into this. And then And when I looked into it, the closest one was like New Hampshire. And so here I am, like, my baby is like, I don't know. She hadn't been small enough where I know I left my husband breast milk because he needed to be able to feed her while I was gone. Took a plane to Boston, took my first Uber out to New Hampshire, and joined the RRCA certification class. And the amount of nerve and funds that had to work up to be there, I'm almost in awe of myself for being able to do that. I will say that it was a little bit of a reality check, because here I am being seen as this expert and a leader amongst my friends and community. And then being in that room, I felt totally opposite. I felt like everything was over my head, that everyone knew all the things except for me. I was, visibly the only person of color. There was another man of color. So there's two BIPOC people. I should say I was the only woman of color. And, I didn't understand how all these things played into how I was feeling in that moment. I mean, within the whole weekend, I think I barely said maybe like one time, maybe like, I didn't even raise my hand. I think I was called on, like I just felt very small, very small, very intimidated, and very that feeling of questioning what you're doing and questioning if this is the right step. And, fast forward to what I do right now, it's really amazing to me to understand that feeling. I could have easily bowed out of being a coach and showing up in this space. And no one would know. You know what I mean? It would have been so easy just to walk away from something that I thought that I had wanted. But the other side of that, and pushing past your fear and leaning into the unknown, the other side of that is quite remarkable. And, that's how I was able to eventually build Game Changers, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second. But, I will say that it took a bit of courage, really, to stay in that space and then to do something about it afterwards. I think a lot of times we are in these spaces where we're in these like learnings, whatever it's for, whether it's training or self-development. And sometimes we leave those things in our books and the notes we take in the folders, but it's like, what action are you going to take to put that into fruition, right? How are you going to make this a reality? And I really don't know what made me put it into reality, other than, again, going back to the promise that I made myself. I always like to say that the most powerful, voice you hear is your own, and the most important promises you can keep are the ones you say to yourself. Yeah. And that goes back to the marathon, and it goes back to being in the RRCA certification room. And I was like, no, like, this is how I'm going to show up. I might not understand it, or like, it didn't thread so easily into how I was taking up space currently, but it added another layer of education and foundation, a connection to a network, and also the ability for me to feel that I was added that level of credibility, I should say. I think that helped a whole bunch.
Yeah, I very similarly, except I'm in Florida. So I feel like there's a lot that happens in the Orlando area when it comes to trainings and conferences. So I did the training as well. And I remember same thing, kind of sitting on it of, do I have the money to go do this training? Do I have the time to go do this training? And for me, it was simpler in the sense that I could drive 4 hours to where the training was. So there wasn't the element of flying and airport and all of that. But I remember doing the training, and the demographic was definitely different for me. And I think just coming from Florida, probably pull in more BIPOC. I mean, I'm from Miami. So anytime, it's always interesting for me to have conversations with people from other parts of the country, because here I'm surrounded by so much Spanish, so much Latin culture, that I just have to go a county over in either direction from me, and the demographics completely change. But even with that training, there were people who looked like me who spoke Spanish, but it was still very much something you had to travel for it. you have to, it's like 2 nights of a hotel stay. And I had known quite a bit of running simply because I had done a lot of running myself. I had done, Runner's World, online training plans and all that stuff, different running groups. So I had that kind of experience, but even still, there was almost, I feel like an elitist element to the training in terms of the training is for time, or you had people who were there who were Boston qualifiers or former collegiate athletes. And here I'm like, I'm just a mom who likes to run and thought this would be a fun thing to do. So I hear what you're saying, because there were elements of that disconnect for me that where it shows up, or how it shows up for me, is who am I to do what I'm doing? Like, who am I to take up space here? Like, who am I? And it's especially hard when there is no one in front of you that's doing what you're doing. Like, you are the one that is setting the path for all those who come behind you. So thank you for sharing that. But also, how did you come to the decision that you were going to be that person? That I like to say, I always give the metaphor of, with each step you take, you're illuminating the path in front of you and then for those behind you. So how did you get to that point where you wanted to illuminate the path for those around you?
Yes. Oh, that's so beautiful. I'm a visual person, so I totally can see that. So appreciate you sharing that. I'm gonna have to remember that when I go out for those long runs. Like, I'm just illuminating my path.
That's it.
But it's funny when you're in it, you can't really see it and you can't describe it. But looking back, I can share how this path was illuminated, so to speak. So, being in that certification room was definitely a seed that was planted. I didn't necessarily leave there thinking like, oh, we need more women of color as certified run coaches, and what am I going to do about it? No, it was just like an acknowledgement, right? About like how I felt in that space and how there wasn't anyone really that I felt that I related to in different aspects. But I will say that after being certified, I did get several opportunities either to work with brands or to work with businesses. I eventually worked with an athletic club as a run coach. And, all these spaces and places always had someone in the leadership role that was a white male. And if not, then the role right under them was a white female, but still there was the role above me. And again, I think that was like another, like, more seeds, right? Like this constant visual of the same thing that was over and over again in spaces. And I started to think about, well, I kind of want to do something on my own. I've been working with these brands and these businesses, and it would be great if I can get like a panel of female coaches together, and it would be amazing if they're all women of color. So I started to reach out to people that I knew that, were, visible leaders in this running space that were women of color. And I was really surprised to find out that a lot of them, if not most of them, weren't actually certified, which is fine, but I think for me to have an event that I was going to have a panel of experts, it really added to, again, the credentials, right, of them having this certification. So there was like another seed, and lo and behold, I eventually did get a panel of 5 women, 2 of which were women of color. And I had this huge event that was going to take place. I called it the All Women's Run Panel. And I was going to have it at a run retail shop, free bra giveaway, free pair of shoes raffle. We had vendors there. We're going to have a warm up, a cool down. We're going to have a out and back 5K run, a discussion with the panel. I mean, Stephanie, I had all the things.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, you're speaking to my heart. I'm like, you do it all. Have the people, have the run, have the gear, have it all.
Yeah, exactly. In a space that, wasn't charging me. It was going to be a free event. And this was in 2020, March of 2020. So yes, so 2 weeks before my event, which 2 weeks before any event, you have pretty much all your T's crossed, I's dotted type thing. And obviously the world was shut down. So I was devastated, to say the least. But it really, again, gave me the space to understand and think about, like, well, what do I do next? And randomly, I remember being on vacation with my family and thinking about, told my husband I had this idea for a buff, it's like a headband buff. I was like, oh, I would wanted to have like this design and stuff. And I was like, oh, maybe I can sell those, and that'll be like something I can do on the side. And then that led it into like, oh, you know what? Like, I should do the all women's run panel again. And, maybe that could be like a swag piece for it. Right. So this is all like little ideas that are forming. And then, I started to think about revisiting the idea of like, if I do this all women's run panel, I can do it virtual now. And if it's virtual, like I can have, reach more people. And all of a sudden, this thought came into my mind about connecting all those dots, all those seeds that had been planted of not seeing other women of color, not only in that certification room, but taking up space, showing up in places of leadership, that I hadn't seen before. So maybe I was thinking, maybe what I can do is fund a few women so that, more women of color can be certified run coaches. So my goal was 5 women. And I was going to now turn the all women's run panel virtual. And I was going to charge a fee for people to register for the event. And yeah, it was my way of, making a dent in what I thought was needed change. And it really was a funding thing. I just wanted to fund these 5 women so that they can get their certification. It wasn't like a program or anything like that. And I remember one of the first calls. Oh, actually, I'll share 2 quick first calls. One first call was to RRCA. I told them what I was doing, and they were on board with the mission. And they said, you know what, we're going to hold spots for you. So I work with RRCA every year, and they hold spots for my company so that access is no longer a barrier, right? Because if a lot of times these things go online and they get sold out really quickly. So now RRCA holds spots for us so that we can fill those roles through our Game Changers program. And that was, the first call really was an email. But I remember getting this other, I said calls, this is another email. But I remember getting an email from a company that's in the industry, but they were kind of like duplicating emails to me. And I remember typing back to them, like I was just going to say like, hey, I'm getting these dual emails, kind of like, can you check that? But all of a sudden I kept typing. And what I kept typing was like, I'm, I have this all women's run panel, and I'm gaining funds to get women of color certified to be run coaches. And we need to change the landscape of run leadership and all this stuff. And I was like, saying like, hey, do you want to be involved in this? And I'm funding 5 women and blah, blah, blah. And so I remember them emailing back like pretty much right away. And I was like, oh, wow. And they're like, you're funding 5. They're like, great, we'll match that. And I'm like, what? And so all of a sudden I could fund 10 women, and I'm like, this is amazing. And then RRCA was holding me 15 spots just in case. And so then I started to talk to other people, other organizations, at that point I'd been running like, I don't know, this is 2020, I gotta do the math. I don't know, maybe like 15 years at that point, if I'm taking a quick guess. So I definitely had people that I knew in the running community. So I was reaching out to everybody and anybody, telling about the all women's run panel, how this was, you have run coaches at your fingertips while paying it forward for future run coaches, and just having them understand that they were paying this registration fee that is going to go to the next wave of leadership in the industry. And I remember I had filled up about 13 spots, and I had a Q&A session to let people understand, women of color understand, what is run coaching. I didn't want them just to blindly be a run coach. I wanted them to really understand like what it is, and having what the benefits are and what it is to be certified. And in that call, I remember telling them like, RRCA is holding me 15 spots, but I only have funds right now to cover 13, but I'm going to really try my hardest to get the rest of the funds so that we can fund more women. And one of the potential sponsor had emailed me back and was saying, you can fund 13, you're trying to reach 15. They're like, we'll fill that gap for you. And so they wrote me a check, Stephanie. And I was like, I remember I had just formed my business. Okay. I called my bank and I was like, oh my goodness, like, who do they make the check out to? Do they make the check out to VCPM Inc., Vanessa? Like, they're like, first, congratulations. They can make a check out to any one of those. And I'm like, okay, great. And so like, I composed myself like, yes, you can make the check out to VCPM Inc. And then the beautiful thing there is, so could fund 15. My run friends from Latinas in Motion, so run friends from New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut came together. They FaceTime me one day and were like, Vanessa, we put our funds together and we want to fund one more woman of color to be certified. And so all of a sudden I had enough funds to cover 16 women. So I reached out to RRCA and was like, I know you're holding 15, but I have enough for 16. They're like, no problem. And that's how we got our original Game Changers to 16 women. And that's why we do the female coach lead every month on the 16th, because we first started with 16 Game Changers. And it really started to open my mind of like, wow, like, this is something that not only I feel is needed, but other people feel it's needed. And while we started this, still wasn't a program. It was those first 16 women that started calling it a program. And I remember thinking, again, stepping up to that responsibility. I remember like, wait, we have a program? Like, this is a program? Like, okay, yeah, it's a program. And then thinking about, well, what crucial components are needed to make this a program? What crucial components are needed so that women of color are not just given an opportunity, but they're given the resources to stay in this industry and really thrive? And that's what the Game Changers program is. We have the funding for certification, which is RRCA and CPR first aid, because you need that to be a run coach certified. We have a business coach. So she helps them strategize. Okay, great. You have your certification. Well, what do you want to do with it? And whatever you want to do with it, let's get you there. And the third component is mentorship. So we have fellow women of color certified run coaches that have been coaching a little bit longer, that they become mentors to our Game Changers. And now those are the three components of the Game Changers program.
How did you come up with Game Changers as a name?
Yeah, that happened too, like just kind of by accident. I remember thinking about, we need to change this, like we need to understand that being different is okay. A lot of times I tell our coaches, like, I don't want us to focus on being better, right? Because that's already working with the foundation of something that wasn't built or designed with us in mind, right? We're different, and let's capitalize on that difference. And so it became about this idea of like, changing what is the norm, changing the game, right? Changing what we see in terms of leaders, experts, run leadership. And it just became like, let's change the game. And that turned into like Game Changers. And again, there wasn't like a moment or even like a meeting or something like that. I wish I could like pinpoint it, but I just know it was like this overall bigger message that, we were able to chisel down to like Game Changers. And I think that says it all.
I love all of that. I just love all of it. And I have a question that I'm sure you've gotten, and it's real present for me because this morning, as I'm driving my kids to school, we were talking about just the work that I do and how I focus everything on women. The podcast, it's only women. That's all. The guests are always women. Any experiences that I put on that are from me will always be centered and focused on women. And my daughter asked me why, and I gave her a whole slew of reasons why it was only focused on women. And then her response was, wow, I didn't know I was entering a debate. and I just started to laugh, but I gave her my reasons for why the focus is on women. And now the question that I have for you is, so why are you focusing on women, and particularly BIPOC women, in your Game Changers program?
Yes. For me, it ties back to why I'm doing this. And whatever anyone who's listening, whatever you're doing in life that you have a calling for, there's a deeper thread to the reasons why you want to do it. Like people might call it your North Star, people might call it your purpose, people might call it your why. But once you tap into that, there really is this igniting of fire because you want to see something succeed and thrive and push forward no matter what. And for me, like honestly, that ties back to my mom. And so, like, you know, I resonate the most with women of color and taking up space because I was in those rooms and spaces when my mom was trying to do the same. Um, so, my parents came here from Ecuador, and I'm the youngest daughter, but, my brothers and sisters are a lot older than me, and then my younger brother is a lot younger than me. So, there was a time where I was the one left at home, and my father owns his own business, so my mom would have to do a lot of things, in terms of that business. So it was either going to the banks or going to the post office, or even for the family, going to the grocery store, or going to, back then, I don't know, like it's called Sears. I remember us
Yeah.
going to Sears a lot. But in all those spaces, my mom would kind of give me this nudge, like to talk on her behalf. And going back to like feeling small or feeling intimidated or feeling different, speaking on her behalf, it was kind of made me pretty shy because I felt a little embarrassed. I felt a lot of embarrassed, in all honesty. We were different, and the people that we're talking to also treated us differently, not all the time, but I didn't know, what discrimination was. I didn't know about racism. I didn't know about, being biased. I didn't know none of that. All I knew was we were different and I didn't like it. And my mom, I remember, she would have me talk on her behalf, and in the moments where she was speaking up for herself, I remember so clearly, like, people would talk to her some type of way. I didn't know it at the time, but she would like turn so red, and like her mouth would get like really tight, and she'd be like, "I'm not stupid." Like she would tell them, "I'm not stupid." I remember being like, "Oh my goodness, mom, like what are you doing?" Like, I felt like so embarrassed by it. I mean, years later, now I look back and I'm like, wow, my mom was trying to advocate for herself. She was trying to advocate for us. She was trying to take up space. And, in all being in the, whether that was the bank, whether that was at the post office, whether it was at Sears, um, it really resonates with me for people who voices aren't heard in the room, like my mom. Oh my goodness, like that resonates with me so much. So, when you say why women of color, woo, I can't believe this still hits home. I just am constantly reminded of being a voice for my mom, finding my voice through running. Now I get to use that voice to amplify others. Because I no longer want us to wait our turn to be heard. I no longer want us to feel like we need to live small, whether that's in action or in voice. And so that's why I say women of color, because that's what resonates with me the most because of my mom.
Yeah. And I it's funny how being a mom can change you in
Yeah.
terms of how you look back on your childhood and even just how you move forward through your parenthood. And that is something that I find. I have two daughters, and they're beautiful girls, intelligent girls, and smart girls. And I have to constantly tell them, you've got to take up space. This world was not made for you to succeed. Like, this is not a world where we're women. And if you leave Miami, particularly women of color, it's not made for you to succeed. So you've got to take up space. And that to me is such an interesting thing, because, and I don't know if you're like first generation American, because I often think of my childhood and how I was the one, as the oldest daughter, navigating a lot of the American systems on behalf of my mom. And feeling the weight of that responsibility of getting it all right. And now that I'm a mom myself, I'm like, okay, no, you girls need to see this. So particularly my oldest, she's 13, she gets embarrassed by me all the time because I'm like, no, who do I need to talk to? Like, who do I need to talk to figure this out? And there are days where I feel like that small voice that comes in and says, you're being too much, you're taking up too much space, starts to come in. And then her embarrassment on top of that leaves me to question of like, wait, am I taking up too much space? Am I? And it's like, no, man, if I don't advocate for myself, and if I don't advocate for my children, and if I just don't advocate, guess what? I'm going to be put to the side. And it's really interesting
That's
because
right.
I was thinking, I shared this story with another run coach a few weeks ago of how when I was in college, so I finished college and I had a summer semester before I moved to Boston. I lived in Boston for 4 years. And during that summer semester, I worked in the Office of International Admissions for the college that I went to. If you know me, you'll know which school I'm talking about. And I'll never forget the day that I was in the closet filing paperwork for the applications, and one of the admissions director came in and told me I would never be anything more than a person who files paper. And I said, oh, wow. Like, okay, this is the world that this is the world that we inhabit, right? Like where it doesn't really take long to find someone to tell you who you cannot be, whatever. And at that point, I'm a 21-year-old young woman. I was still figuring life out, right? Like I didn't know what I wanted to do. But to be told that definitely lit a fire in me of, no, I am going to be something. And even if I don't know what it is at the moment, I am going to be that. And I try to model that for my daughters of, you can be it and you can take up space. And in doing that for them, there is some generational healing, which is what I hear from you as well. Of like, there's that generational healing of, my mother couldn't do it, but I'm going to try to do it. But then there's also, for me, the weight of, oh, wait, but no one else has done this.
Yeah.
And I need to figure out how to do it. So I just find your entire story so beautiful because it's, for me, I'm like, wait, I'm trying to figure it out. And then I'm just like, I'm focused on the microcosm of my daughters, of like uplifting them. Whereas you've taken it a step even further of it's you, it's your community, but now it's through this game changer program, right? That first program, it's 16 women, but those 16 women then ripple out into their communities.
Exactly.
So I say all that to say just one, thank you for doing what you're doing, because a lot of people will see what you've seen, but won't do what you've done. And everything in life has brought you there. So to me, it really is. I'm just grateful I get to talk to someone like you, because in my own way, that's what this podcast is for, is like, can we redefine the voices we hear? Can we amplify the voices we hear? And again, my daughter's like this morning, I went on my tirade and I'm like, the men have enough. Like, don't they already take up enough space? Like, where's the space for us? And even more so when I really go deep down the thought process of, man, as a woman, I've created life twice. I've given birth twice. I've straddled that line between life and death. And yet society tells me it's not enough, or that I'm the quote unquote weaker sex. And it's just a lot. Like that's to me, I'm a thinker. So sometimes I go down these like rabbit holes of thought, but just hearing what you shared is so beautiful, because again, you're taking your experiences and not only changing it for yourself, but you're also looking around you and thinking, whose hands can I hold to bring up with me? And not everyone does that. And I'm sure it's a lot of work. I'm sure it's a lot of work. So the question I have now is, how do you take care of yourself?
Yes.
You're lifting everyone else up.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. But one thing I heard somewhere that I've said to our coaches too, it's, I know once you know your why, you figure out the how. And that's
Mm.
what I've been doing, what I mean, figuring out the how. And, I definitely working on building a team, working on our coaches are a big support. I think just knowing that I have this whole network and community of women of color certified run coaches, behind me, and behind each game changer and each mentor in the program. I think there's like a force there, you know what I mean, that like really propels you forward. And of course, as you can tell, I have a very deep connection to why I do what I do. So I think there's something there that even in my hardest days, there's something that, I love what I do. My business now, I just celebrated 3 years. So in 2020, when I started my business, officially started my business, 2 months later, we were able to bring in game changers. So everything has just been like really like, fast forward in such a beautiful way. The way that I do the things that I do, I have, I'll answer this in two parts. Like strategically, I do have a team, right? So I have a mentor, I have an advisor, I have a business consultant, I have an accountant. My husband owns his own business as well, so he understands that all the things. But still, there is a lot because I'm also, a runner, right? I'm also obviously a business owner, a wife, a daughter, a friend, a sorority sister, and I really find it important to tap into all the pieces that make me whole. So in the moments where I do feel off, it gives me the chance to say to myself, well, what part am I not fulfilling, right? I can't always be all business owner. I can't even be always all mom. I'm Vanessa, and all those different pieces make me. And so sometimes when I feel, off kilter, so to speak, I have to understand, what piece is missing. But I'm saying this so like easily, but it's not that simple. I would say one of the things that I heard from one of these like a community talk I was in, someone was saying that they don't necessarily find balance in their lives, they find harmony.
Mhm.
And I thought that was such a great way to describe, because there's such an ebb and flow in all the things that we do. And it feels like such a less responsibility or burden, to have to keep things in balance, because it's just not realistic, at least not for me. But the other side of that, so I have my team and stuff like that. But I also make it a point to really incorporate things that put me in my day first. So like before I get out of bed, I say my prayers, and then get out of bed, I do a meditation. And then things after that, or they vary, but I really try to incorporate all the things. Like on my best days, like that's also like foam rolling and like reading my book. I do core exercises. I have diastasis recti, so I have like a permanent gap in my abs. And then when I come to this space in my office, which I haven't been that good at now, so I'm going to call myself out. But what I normally do is I read my affirmations, and then I write in my journal, and then I go into my computer. So I really tried to do my best, and it's not every day that I get the chance to check off all that on my list, but just the fact that I am putting it in the forefront of my mind, and prioritizing it when I can. I just have to give myself grace for the rest. But definitely prayers and meditation, I'm pretty much on point with those, like literally every single day. But that's the way that I'm able to do things. Looking back, all those other pieces of my career have really pointed me in a direction of what I'm doing. So like being a senior project manager, I mean, I'm handling the biggest project of my life, which is my business. So
Yeah.
having things within a certain time frame, within budget, all those skills come to the forefront in what I'm doing. So that's how I get a lot of things done, but it's still, it's still a learning curve for me. I've never wanted to be a business owner, even though my father was one. It was literally the total opposite. I would say verbatim, I'm never going to own a business. Like, it's not for me, right? And then here I am. But it's also about understanding that my father's journey is not my own, and that the things that I have saw maybe that might have wanted me not to be a business owner are things that I get to write myself, right? I get to have the pen in my hand and write out what this looks like. And at the same time, it's also the beautiful aspect of my mom and my father, like that's and all our ancestors before them, like that's generational strength right there. Like that's irreplaceable. You know what I mean? And so however I write this story, like I have such a strong foundation and who I am and what makes me, like literally my roots, the blood that flows through my veins. Like those are things I think about, like when I'm out for a run or when I'm like, in the thick of things in my business, because there has to be something bigger than your to do, right? My to do can go out the door, Stephanie, and around the block, right? But it's like, what's the deeper thing there? Why am I able to show up the way that I show up? And that goes beyond my to-dos or my schedules or the meetings and all the follow-ups. It's really about, who I am as a person, and how that is, I like to think, is contributed to all the people who have come before me. And then I get to show up not only for me, but for all of us every single day.
Yeah, that's well, first of all, so much synchronicity, because that balance and harmony theme is something I brought up this past weekend on a retreat that I held for women. And
Nice.
we talked about that. Like I even told them, I'm like, there's no such thing as balance. And I was like, I can't remember who I heard it from, but she talked about focusing more on harmony because of that ebb and flow, because there are days, and even within our days, there are moments where certain roles are going to take up more space than others, where your attention is going to have to be somewhere else. So I love that you brought that up, because I was like, ding, ding. Yes, yes. But also the idea of not wanting to be a business owner, I didn't want that either. I thought it was a lot of work and a lot of responsibility. And I think it was just for me, when I envisioned myself as a business owner, I envisioned myself doing something completely different than what I do now. And what I do now, because I enjoy it, because I get to do things like this, have a podcast, the weight of being a business owner doesn't feel the same as however I had envisioned it before. So I love that. And I also just, even listening to you talk, I'm like, but everything has made sense with how it's flowed from you saying, this is the goal that I have for myself personally, to doing the run coaching, to then doing game changers. And even from there, the coach lead, like all of that seems like it has flowed so organically. Has it felt that way for you, where everything is just like, yeah, this is not even the next logical step, but the next step that feels good for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a little bit of that and not that, if that makes sense. So some of it has flowed. Just like, going back to the all women's run panel, how that flowed into like a program and game changers and stuff. But other of it is, tapping into my team, right? I say team, but that's my mentor, advisor, business consultant. It's always good to talk to people who know things that you don't know, or that can see things that you can't see. And so sometimes it has been, whether it's an idea I have or something that they're like, hey, maybe look into this. I mean, I think that helps a lot too. So having that support system of matching my ebb and flow of how things have gone, but definitely having a team in place, because it's a lot to be a business owner, and sometimes it can feel like a solo journey, but having people there that support you really lets you know that you're not alone.
Yeah. All right. I have 3 more questions for you.
Yeah.
And the first question is, what does it mean to live without limits?
Yes. So to live without limits is not putting any barrier in front of you. to understand that you are capable more than you can imagine, and that your capabilities are limitless. So think big, dream big, have big goals, be okay with wanting more, for asking for more, for knowing that you deserve more. I think when I think about being limitless, it's just there's no holds bar. I think a lot of the times we are the ones that hold ourselves back, whether that's negative thinking or thinking about, what we can't do. And so the words that we say to ourselves become our biggest barriers. But once you can release yourself from that, it's like the sky's the limit. And, once you realize that you are capable than more than you can even imagine. And I think the marathon, I think it's a great on-ramp for that, right? Because you're thinking like, oh, I can never do 26.2, and then you do it. And then you're like, well, what else can I do? What else did I think was impossible that now just because I've done something so challenging, now it becomes that much more realistic and that much more possible. So when I think about the word, being living without limits, it's that feeling of just wanting to do things that really, like I said, reflect more of yourself, wanting more, being more. Because I don't know, I just feel like sometimes we define ourselves and our roles, like even with coaching, some people might see it as this box, you coaching, training plans, start, finish lines. But no, like coaching is a vehicle that we're using to get different speakers at conferences, to get different experts cited in articles, to get, different authors of industry books, to get different people on the mic, to get different people in front of the room. Like, we're using coaching as a vehicle for that. We're using coaching as this limitless potential to change run leadership at the industry level. My goal, like I said before, was 5 coaches. Well, I read a book and it changed my whole mindset. And I was like, you know what? We're not going to just do 5 coaches. We're going to redefine the whole industry. And together with our mentors and our mentees, our game changers, we have 80 coaches now in 27 states. And we're about to bring in another 24, like literally, like by next week, we'll be probably announcing that. So, had I put that cap on myself, had I defined what I was doing by what the standard was, I would have really, really limited myself. But once I removed that, barrier, once I opened up my mind to what, is more out there, then it really led me to this space of, I don't know all the answers, I don't know what's around the corner, but you know what? I am going to be brave and face the unknown, because what's on the other side is going to be something that's so magical that I'm going to be better for it.
Why is it important for women to want this for themselves, right? When we think of the sport, and I always ask myself, how do I get more people into the sport? How can I encourage more women to show up, to not care about pace, not do any of that, to just show up? And I spend a lot of time thinking about that question, but in terms of what you're doing with Game Changers, and like you said, you have a new cohort coming up, and I think this time it's from what I saw, it's like there was an application, and then from those applications, you're going to pick the people. So it's even in that way, there's growth, and I'm sure you've had tremendous interest in that. Why is it important for women to come into the sport of running? Why is it important for women to want to take up leadership within the running industry?
I think when you think about who's at the helm of this industry and most industries, it's the same gender, same race, and mostly white males, So I think it's important for us to change what that looks like. The world is so diverse in many different ways. And, to think that this sport of running is its own microcosm isn't realistic. We need it to reflect what the world looks like. And there's so much value, and there's tons of research out there about how there's so many benefits to having diversity on a team, in a company, in decision making. And so I think when, decisions are being made at the industry level that affect us all, we need to think about who's in that room. Who is it that's trying to figure out problems or sharing their opinion or perspective, who's reflected in those decisions. And it can't be always all males, and it can't be always all white males or, non-BIPOC people. It has to be us all. So it's important for us to be those not only community leaders, those health advocates, those role models, but those experts and leaders in those spaces and places that are making decisions that affect us both at the community level and the industry as a whole. We need women that are already knowledgeable about what they do in running, right? It's just, giving them the tools and resources to understand that what they have is not only important, but it needs to be valued and it needs to be for the masses. So it is important for women to take up space in that way, because we need to have that, collection and of the minds, so to speak. And if it's only one mind and one collection of people leading that way, then where does that lead the rest of us,
Mm.
And I think as more women do that, they're definitely being a message to those that follow us into the sport, right? Like younger generations, not just young girls, but young boys too. Us showing up is also a message to young boys and males, excuse me, about what leadership looks like, what an expert looks like, what a run coach looks like, what a runner looks like. And the more we normalize that at a younger age, the more they can grow up knowing that that's just the way it is.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I love that. All right. Last question is just tell us where we can find you, where we can learn more about you, and what exciting stuff you've got coming up so that we can celebrate you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and appreciate the time today to share this journey and everything that has led up to what's the saying, the winding road that's led me straight to what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
So people can find me on Instagram, VCP Mitchell. My website, vcpm.com. And you can find out more information there on Game Changers. I'm also on LinkedIn, Vanessa Peralta-Mitchell. And like I said, our Game Changers application just closed on Sunday. So we're in the process of our selections, and we'll be bringing in another 24 game changers. So we should be announcing that within the next week or two, and just really excited to get them, rolling and having their program start. I will say I'm also excited about our first official meetup. So like I said, we're going to be meeting in Atlanta at the race. So it's the first time that a lot of us are going to be meeting, because the program started in 2020 in a very virtual space. That's how I'm able to really expand our reach, is by making this opportunity virtual. But we're actually going to meet in person, a lot of us. It's about like 25 coaches coming from like all parts of the US. And what's nice about the race is that the race director is one of the coaches from our network. So we're going to go there twofold, right? To support her and the amazing event that she puts on, and also for us to be there in community. We're going to have a, oh, excuse me. Talk about full circle. I didn't actually put this together until right now, but at the expo for the race, we're going to have a coaches panel, and it's going to be all game changers. So it's going to be all women of color, certified run coaches that are going to be on this panel. Oh my goodness, I'm so happy you asked, Stephanie, because I didn't even like put that together. So how amazing, like I was, looking for people to do that, in 2020, to fast forward, like now, like we are that, So we're going to have that at the expo. We're going to have a photo shoot. So our presenting sponsor is Brooks. They're providing us some photographers. So we're going to have some photos taken with our Game Changer shirts on. We're going to have a team group dinner, team group brunch, and we're also doing some community service. So the race director, her name is Tess. Shout out to Coach Tess. She does a really amazing job about making the race not just one day. And so she provides opportunities the day after the race for people to do community service. So as a team, Game Changers is going to do some community service with Back on My Feet.
Oh,
And that's how we're
nice.
gonna, yeah, really nice, right? So then that's how we're going to end the weekend. So I'm super excited to meet a lot of our coaches. We're all staying in the same, well, most of us are staying in the same house. So it's just going to be a really beautiful weekend of connection and community. So yeah.
I love that. I'm excited for you, for the new cohort, and for all the chances you've taken on yourself that have then led to you creating chances for other women to take on themselves. So thank you for all that you're doing. And it's just thank you. That's it. I'm just going to end with a thank you. Do you have any final words for us here on the podcast?
Thank you. You know, I appreciate what you're doing and how you're taking up space. I appreciate you for reaching out, and, you know, shout out to Becky for making that connection for us to talk today. I, you know, think there's something when people take time out from what they're doing, because we're all doing so many things. But when people take a time out to shine a light on others, I think that speaks highly of the person doing that. So definitely shout out to you for doing that with not just me and Game Changers, but with, I've heard some of your other podcasts as well. So I know the time and effort that it does take to do stuff like that. So I applaud all the work that you're doing. And to those listening, there's this quote that I always live by. I think it's nice to share, but it's, let me bring it down here so I can read it to you guys. So the quote that I've shared is, that I like to share is, if you don't live your purpose, you may be preventing others from living theirs. And I think that's like hones in on everything that we talked about today, and why we do what we do, who we do it for, and why it's important for women and women of color in particular to take up space and claim their presence as leaders, as those at the helm of the industry, and for us all to change the game in our own way and right. So thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you. All right, everyone. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.